China is pursuing a new brand of imperialism, hijacking educational institutions of the free world. From Australia to the UK, China has a clear plan: infiltrate premier universities, make them dependent on your students, and establish close links to the top brass of leading universities. The UK's universities are increasingly losing their shine. Students from around the world don't want to travel to the UK anymore, and the main but unstated reason for the same is China's gross interference and support for British universities. In the UK alone, Chinese students account for almost £2 billion in revenue for the higher education sector. 9 British universities depend on Chinese students for more than 20% of their revenue from tuition fees. Meanwhile, 17 schools in the UK are owned by the Chinese. Needless to say, China has eaten into Britain's education sector, and the consequences are about to be devastating. Hi and welcome. This is TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I am your host Sanbir Hotra, and in this video I will explain how Chinese companies are funding some premier British universities and trying to buy out their academic freedom. China is rising in terms of hegemony and global influence, and as the West tries to push back against China's growing influence, the authoritarian nation is trying to buy out the very soul of the Western world, its premier educational institutions. The Times has published a report detailing how Huawei has been accused of infiltrating a Cambridge University research center. Many other leading British universities are reported to have taken millions of dollars in direct funding from China. Chinese interference at the CCCM really reveals how China has been trying to infiltrate British educational institutions by hook or by crook. 3 out of 4 of the directors at the Premier Research Center are said to have ties to Huawei, a Chinese technology giant whose 5G technology has been banned in the UK over national security concerns. In fact, the Times has also reported that the CCCM was launched in 2018 in Shenzhen, a Chinese tech hub. Yang Pinghu, a former senior Huawei vice president, has been described as the research center's chief representative on its website. Hu is reportedly entitled to a special allowance from the State Council. The allowance is a special award for experts favored by the Chinese Communist Party. Meanwhile, Cambridge University has clarified that Hu is not currently and has never provided anything towards or delivered any services to Cambridge Judge Business School or the Cambridge Center for Chinese Management. Chinese influence at the Cambridge Center for Chinese Management is really just the tip of the iceberg. In June, a study by the China Research Group, a conservative group that bats for a more hawkish British foreign policy against China, found that 20 leading UK universities had received a total of £40 million or $55.38 million from Huawei and Chinese state-owned companies in recent years. Imperial College London received between £3.5 million and £14.5 million from Huawei. The university also accepted at least £10 million from Sinopec, China's state-controlled petroleum and chemicals corporation, and £6.5 million from the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, which is a Chinese state-owned defense and aerospace company. Meanwhile, Huawei also gave £1.1 million to Lancaster University for research on sensitive subjects like semiconductors, computing, and machine learning since 2015. It also gave £890,000 to York University for undisclosed research projects. The institutions made these disclosures in response to Freedom of Information requests from the CRG. China's clear strategy is to hijack British education by making them dependent on its students for their finances. Last month, a right-wing think tank, Onward, published a report which disclosed that in 2018 and 19, 120,385 students in British universities came from mainland China. This is the highest number of students coming to British universities from any country in the world, and India came a distant second with 26,685 students. Most students translate into more fee and earnings from British institutions. Fee income from Chinese students stood at £2.1 billion in 2018 and 19, which was over 10% of the total. At some premier universities like Liverpool, Glasgow, Sheffield, Manchester, UCL, and Imperial College, fee from Chinese students accounted for over a quarter of the fee income. The Guardian further reported that Liverpool and Nottingham have campuses in China. Cambridge has a Tsinghua Professorship in Development Studies. which is endowed with £3.7 million in charity controlled by the family of a former Chinese Prime Minister. Moreover, at least 10 UK research laboratories are now perilously dependent on funding from Chinese defense firms. But why does China want to fund British universities? Make no mistake, Chinese funding to British universities is no philanthropy. This is a strategic investment that companies with close ties to the CCP and the Chinese state-owned enterprises are making. They have two main purposes to achieve. Firstly, to control the narrative on key issues like human rights violations committed by CCP authorities in China, and secondly, to hijack critical research centers in the UK involved in crucial sectors like semiconductors. Tom Tugendhat, the Tory MP who heads the CRG and serves as the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, said, "Perceived academic influence is clearly an issue, and just as universities would never take money from tobacco companies to investigate links with cancer, so institutions need to be very careful about where they accept their money." The UK must understand that China is trying to buy out its educational institutions. Ultimately, China is trying to control the British academia and bring them in line with Chinese authoritarianism. This is actually a direct assault on British democracy and freedoms. A similar Chinese attack was also targeting Australian universities, but the Scott Morrison government was able to secure its campuses in time. Now, it remains to be seen if the UK can protect its campuses from the CCP.